running a little bit late, and but I wanted to still obviously it's fun that we're here though, at least a little bit late, but man, lots of chatter in the chat box already. Troy from Rockland, thank you for joining. Totem from Italy, excellent. Ciao, Mr. McLaren. Gunter is here again. Chris, man, all kinds of familiar names and faces. Steven from Idaho, sweet. Obviously, we have Scott Williams, who could probably teach us a few things about CSS as well, actually. Yeah, I am a little bit late today. If you noticed right down there, I was going to surprise you guys. I like set up all this whole green screen thing, and literally like 3 minutes before I was about to start, the whole thing just collapsed. And I was like, seriously? So I had it like all set up, and I'll try to get it fixed next week. I got some cool stuff. I've been playing around with the green screen, and let me know in the chat box if everyone can hear me. Just give me a couple thumbs up or hey, sounds good, before I really get started, because I don't want to start and have the audio kind of all messed up and whatnot. So hope everyone's doing great. The Goat Prince is here. Excellent. Thank you. Wolf, good to see you, bud. Tony's here from Hawaii. Awesome, man. Man, we got a great turnout today. I guess all of you really want to learn about some CSS, huh? So here, okay, while I'm waiting, oh, no video? No video? You guys don't see my video? Oh, no video. Now you see me. Haha. There we go. Okay, audio okay, no video. Sorry, I forgot to make the, you guys were just seeing my desktop. Thank you for that, Jody. Just see, yeah, there's my green screen right down there, and I messed up. It literally just, like, I was tweaking the settings for the green filter. Well, first, I started tweaking the settings, and I had a green shirt on. Well, you know, go figure. And then, so I had a green shirt on. I'm like, oh, shoot, got a red shirt, got it all set up, and then literally 2-3 minutes before I was going to go live, the whole thing just collapsed. And I was like, so, anyway, I think the glue was loose, and yeah, I should have spent $20 more for the nicer model, I guess. That's what you get. Okay, so today we're going to be reviewing some CSS. Oh, another quick little toy I got. Watch this. So I got this cool little key light that I can like control from my Mac. And so yeah, it's kind of cool. As you see, I get nice boop, really cool. So a key light so you can see my beautiful face. Is this my good side or is this my good side? I don't know. You tell me. Okay, so anyway, that's enough playtime. CSS. Hopefully audio and video is good. Now, Nathan, thank you for joining. Steven, thank you for joining as well. So today we're going to be looking at some CSS, exciting stuff. And what I want to do is I want to give you guys, I'm not going to teach you like, you know, in a text editor, this is all the CSS you need to know. I'm going to try to keep it as basic and as simple as possible, right? So essentially, how do I, right? I mean, mostly I don't like fire up a text editor when you guys emailing questions or sending questions on, hey, I want this background color to be a little bit different, or hey, you know, the spacing between these is wrong, or the Z index is too low. I'll teach you guys basically what the common CSS properties you might want to use, and then how you can learn to apply those styles and play around with live web pages without needing to like fire up a geeky text editor and figure all this out with just your brain, right? So really, really excited about that today. So first off, I guess what we should do is we should maybe talk a little bit about, I guess before I get started, I do want to reference a book actually, okay? There is one book that I think all RapidWeaver users should own. And let me go get it really quick. I should have prepared. I was a little flustered because of the whole green screen thing, but let me go get it really quick. Luckily, I didn't have to go far and I knew where it was. Boom. HTML and CSS by John Duckett. Fantastic book. The bindings on mine are a little weird. Some pages kind of got loose. I don't know. I don't know if it was a faulty version, but build quality aside of the book is beautiful. It's like a coffee table book for HTML and CSS. And it is not your average technical programming book at all. Okay. It really is a beautiful book. I think it costs you like 10 or 15 bucks. Get it. Okay. It is, even I enjoy it, right? I don't reference it too much because most of the stuff I know off the top of my head right now, right? But it's just it's a really beautiful book. I mean, look at the style of the book. Like it's just really nice. It's not your average book, right? It's got beautiful pictures and it's really like a coffee table book with code in it. And but it's really good. The approach that he takes to teach you how to do various things is completely different than any other book. I've had this book for probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years maybe. And I recommend it still to this day because I've never seen anything quite as good as this HTML and CSS book. So plug done for the day. John Duckett, HTML and CSS. Thank you, John. I appreciate you writing the book and making all this stuff possible because, yeah, it's a great book. Go out and get it. So I guess where we should start now is we should start off and let's look at a web page. Okay, now I didn't build any sort of particular web pages today. I just thought it would be fun to look at a couple web pages, maybe even Weaverspace. Maybe I'll jump over to Weaverspace and we're just going to start mucking with it, right? And the number one thing I'm going to show you today in how to learn is using the web inspector inside Safari. Now you can use the same web inspector in Chrome or whatnot. I just happen to be a Safari user and a lover, so I use Safari. But the dev tools in Firefox as well as Chrome are going to be extremely similar enough where you're going to have no problems transitioning from what I'm going to show you today to Chrome or Firefox if those are the tools that you're using. Okay. Hey, Ken, thanks for joining from Mount Rushmore. That's pretty cool. Never been to Mount Rushmore. But let's go ahead and get started. Let me get my desktop going here. Okay. Man, it'll be really cool once I get that green screen thing going. So bummed today. It's okay. Let's open up a browser. So here we got Safari. And, oops, Safari isn't displaying. That's weird. My window is there, but it's like it's a screenshot. Oh, shoot. A little bit of live troubleshooting here. Oh, never had that happen before. That's some crazy stuff. I have a window on my screen, but the software is not seeing it. How fun is that? That's a new one. Give me 1 second. Okay, I got screen capture. Without a doubt. Here, let's just go here. Screen capture. New screen capture. Why not? Okay. It's almost there. Let me just resize it because that's really, really big. And there we go. Okay. That was weird. Not sure what happened there. Sorry about that. On the fly debugging. It's always fun. One thing I actually want to point out really quick. It'll be in this week's newsletter, the This Week in Weaverspace newsletter, is that if you've ever noticed recently in the past couple months, you've probably seen this new little widget at the bottom of Weaverspace. And what I've done in the past couple weeks is I've imported all my FAQs and stuff from the doc portal are now all inside of here. So as you see, I've had announcements for like deals of the week and a couple other things over the past couple months. But if you click on this, you can now search my entire FAQ database directly from in here. Pretty cool. Soon, all of these will be linked on the individual product pages, probably by next week. But yeah, I'm really happy that now we can do a full search. Like here, let's like do total CMS on a license or something like that, right? And there you go. Can I upgrade my license from easy to total CMS? And so on and so forth. So really cool stuff. You can now search my entire FAQ knowledge base from right within every page on the site. So really cool. That widget is also on the Weaverspace community. So good stuff there. Okay, but back to business. We are going to learn today about how to use the Dev Inspector, okay, and how to use the Dev Inspector to help us style and customize our websites. Because a lot of times, I'll make a stack or someone else will make a stack, and maybe you want things styled a little bit differently, right? I tend to try to give you as many options as possible, right? A lot of settings inside the stacks, and not everyone does that. But even the settings that I have, a lot of times, people just want to tweak it a little bit more. Maybe they want a different value, or, they want to change a setting that I don't have a setting for, right? So it happens all the time. So today we're going to teach you how to look at all of that. And, we're going to go over a few base properties, a couple other ways for you to help you learn what other CSS properties you can do and when to use what. Okay. So open up your browser to any website, even your own. Okay. Might be fun if you want to do this now. Okay. And if you ever right click on a browser, actually, before I even start, to enable the Dev Inspector, because it's not enabled by default for everybody. Okay. Basically, you open up the Safari preferences. And if you go to, I think it's advanced. Advanced. At the very bottom, you'll see there's a checkbox here called Show Develop Menu in menu bar, right? So once you have that enabled, oops, I just refreshed the page. You will now see when you right click, you'll see a new thing at the bottom here called Inspect Element, right? So if you inspect element, okay, this will then open up the Dev Inspector for us. Really cool stuff. Okay, let me close this announcement here. And we can do all kinds of stuff inside the Dev Inspector. And you've probably seen this before. And if you notice, this is a hierarchical table or tree view of our entire web page. So like, we can go down and dig into all the various bits of code. And what's kind of cool is if you notice, as I hover over these bits of code, right, it actually shows you what that container is, right? So like, and if you want to style this particular button, right, or if you want to look at the code for this button, right, you just right click on the button and say inspect element, and the inspector will take you to exactly that piece of code, right? Now, what's slick here, this is not really CSS, right? But you can modify stuff in here, right? So like, let's say I wanted to see what this button looked like. Instead of it saying start here, I wanted to say hello, everyone, right? Or something like that, right? So hello, everyone. Oops, and the slide changed, obviously. So there we go. I changed the actual text in the button to be hello, everyone. Now, if I refresh the page, all these changes will be gone, right? So one thing to just know that inside the Dev Inspector here, okay, you can change all that you want. You can play around. You can even delete full things, right? So like, I could be like, you know what? That particular title there, I'm just going to delete that. So I highlighted that item. I probably shouldn't do this on a slider, right? I highlighted that piece of text, and then inside the HTML, and I hit the delete button on my keyboard, and voila, it's gone, right? And to change that button text, right? Essentially, all I did is I double clicked on that particular element, where it said before it said start here. I double clicked on it, and you can change the text, right? You can do all kinds of stuff. If you're familiar with like classes and stuff like that, we'll review what classes are used for in CSS. But you'll notice in here, like I have classes on this particular link here, and if I remove, let's say I remove the large class, okay, just for fun. Double clicked on the classes. And let's go back to that slide. I shouldn't be doing this on a slide because it's just kind of, if you notice now, that button is smaller because it's not a large button. It's the medium button, which is the default, right? So this is the actual, you're modifying the actual web page with stuff. And what's cool is if I ever want to go back to the original, I just refresh the page and everything will be back the way it was, right? So you're just kind of modifying it within the browser, okay? So you're modifying it within the browser temporarily, just so you can kind of see and test and play around. But you can easily just refresh the page. None of the changes are saved, and we're off to the races. So it's a really fun thing to do. I'm in this thing all day long, right? Helping you guys out with various things. I load up a page in the web browser, open up the inspector, and I'm playing around, right? A lot of times I'm mucking around with stuff, deleting stuff, trying to isolate issues on a page. I do this every day, all day long. So a lot of fun here, a lot of things you could do. Another thing I should probably mention before we start into the CSS, one more important thing is the console, right? And this is where a lot of times you have JavaScript errors on the page, or there are maybe some 404 issues that you have, or font issues or stuff like that, right? And if things just aren't working on the page, this is a great place to look, right? So going into the dev inspector, looking at the console and finding if there's any errors, right? So like, for example, here, it couldn't load Google Analytics. I have some firewall software on my routers that denies Google Analytics. And so that's why it's not loading. It exists. It just can't load it because of some firewall software that I have on my, some like ad blocker thing that I have on my network. So cool stuff there. But if there are any JavaScript errors, this is exactly where you will see them. And, a lot of times when pages, like if a slider isn't working, and one thing, if there is a JavaScript error on the page, guess what? Your entire page is broken. So if, let's say, a button has a JavaScript error, it could completely break your slider or your accordion or any other sort of effect or JavaScript thing on your web page. So it is a great tool to really nail down exactly what the problem is. Now, when you see the JavaScript error, you might not know what in the world it is, right? But at least if you click on it, there'll be a little link to where the error is. You can click on that. You can kind of see and figure out what stack is really breaking the thing just based on the error and probably the text. I'm not going to dive into that at all today, but it is very good to know if there are JavaScript errors on the page, because it will potentially break your entire page. Or if there are issues loading Google fonts or any other fonts, maybe you misspelled the Google font name, or you put in an extra space or something like that, right? Or you have some weights that aren't available for that particular font, and maybe you're getting errors in the console. All of that is going to be inside the console to help you out. So really good to know and play around with the console. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm gonna choose a simpler page on my site, one that doesn't have a slider that is we can just play with a little bit more. So we're gonna muck around with my support page right now, and let's play around with something that's kind of common, right? Let's play with font colors and font sizes and things of that nature, right? So let's start targeting this support thing right here. So I'm gonna right click on that support in my header. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to say inspect element, and voila, right? There is, the H3. And again, just to reiterate, if I double click on that, I can actually type in here, hello, live stream peeps. Not sure where I put hello. I never say peeps, whatever. I'm not the kind of guy who says peeps. Well, there, let's just say hello world. I'm not the peeps kind of guy. You are my peeps though. Okay, so we have hello world, right? Just to kind of show you that that's what we do. We can also see inside. Actually, here, let me go ahead and make this text a little bit larger. Maybe it's a little easier for you to see if I make that text larger, even larger. So here I have an H3, and we can see that it says hello world. Okay, I changed it to be hello world. It was support before. Now, if we open up, there's a sidebar that we can open up, okay? And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. We still have this H3 selected, right? Which is this this text here in the header. And what we'll see is if we go to the styles tab, we'll see that these are all of the CSS styles that make up what this text look like. These are all the rules, all the style rules that are used to make this H3 look exactly the way it does. Okay. So if we look here, and it always, and now with CSS, okay, I should say, what does CSS stands for? It stands for Cascading Style Sheet, okay? And that's important, the cascading part of that term, because browsers have default styles for everything. And then probably most likely your theme has a layer that sits on top of the browser that customizes the text and styles a little bit more for that element. And then maybe you have a stack that on top of those styles it even more. So you can have a hierarchy of rules where the browser has its default style. The theme will have its own CSS that overrides the browser stuff. And then maybe you have header pro or letterpress or font pro or something like that. That's then overriding the theme's styles to be exactly what you want, right? And it's the combination of all those rules that ultimately generate what is displayed on in the browser. Hopefully that makes sense. And if we look at this, this is a little complicated, right? So if we scroll all the way down, we can see all the stuff that the browser is applying. And we know it's being overridden by a second rule with these little lines. So if you see lines through them, that means that style is not getting applied because a different rule above it is getting applied instead, right? So we scroll down, and if we see all of these ones are these ones are from the consolidated.css. If you see that, right, those are getting from the theme, right? So if you see something from consolidated.css, that's starting to be the theme styles, okay? And if you look, all of these are getting overwritten, okay? And then we start seeing some other stuff. Here I have some font family was set to Gotham, some font weights. Here I have web font smoothing. This style is getting applied because it doesn't have a line through it, right? And we can keep going up, and we'll see that here's some default styles applied to an H3 tag from the browser. And if we keep going up a little bit more, we have margin 0, padding 0, and we have more rules that are getting overridden by styles above it, right? So these are coming from the theme as well. And as we scroll up, we'll start seeing more styles, such as this one right here. So here we have font weight 700. We have font style italic, and we have family operator A, operator B. This is coming from Font Pro. Okay, I'm loading this font via Font Pro, and I'm specifying the exact weight of this particular style. I'm specifying the style to be italic, and I'm specifying the font family. And if we scroll a little bit up, I can see the color is defaulting to white, which is FFF, right? And what's cool here is we not only see the styles, but we can also start mucking around with them and playing around with these styles. So let's say I wanted to turn off this particular style. If you notice, there's a checkbox there. I can uncheck that. And now, luckily, or unfortunately, this particular one, it falls back down to, so this style is turned off. If we scroll down, we'll see that it's now getting applied from this style. So it's now getting this one. If I turn that one off, we'll see that if we look here, that text is no longer white. It is now a black or a dark gray, right? And if we want to scroll down, we can see exactly, eventually, where that is coming from, right here. So here it's getting color pound 333, which is dark gray, right? So really cool stuff. We can start turning off rules. But that's cool, right? But what if I wanted to like muck around? I want to see what this text would look like if we made it red. Oh boy, right? So let's go ahead and do that. What if I just type red? What? Oops. Red. What? Now if you look here, wow, this is kind of having convulsions over there. Okay. So if we look here, I changed this style here to be color red. And if you look at it, it is using the selector H1, H2, H3.alt, H4.alt, H5.alt, H6.alt, right? So these are the CSS selectors, and we'll talk about selectors in a little bit, okay? But I just wanted to quickly show you what these style rules are, right? And how we can use this dev inspector to really kind of play around and modify stuff, right? So, okay, that made it red. That's kind of cool. Now, if you look, it applied red to all of these. And the reason it applied red to all of these is because this particular rule on the page applies to more than just this particular Hello World title. That style is used on all of these. Okay, so when I change this rule, it changes it page wide, right? And obviously, if I refresh this page, all that's going to be gone, right? Like I said before, anything you modify in the inspector, when you refresh the page, it's gone. So be careful with that as well. Maybe that's something you want, maybe you don't, because sometimes you'll work a little bit on customizing the CSS on things, and you'll accidentally refresh a page or something like that, and it could be kind of dangerous. So we can customize a lot of different things. Color is one of them. I'm going to set this color back to white because red is horrible. That is a perfect example on why you don't give clients control over customizing colors on fonts to everything, because hey, they will do that. They will do purple on or red on purple. It's inevitable. It will happen. So change that back to white. But there are other things that we could do. Now, if you'll notice at the very top here, if I only wanted to apply the style to this particular thing, just as a test, if I click on this up in this area up here called style attribute, okay, if I do color, and what's kind of cool here is this, when you start typing in your own CSS, it kind of auto fills, right? So the CSS select the CSS property that controls font color is called color, right? So we type in color and I tab, and then here you can type in, as you see, it actually pre-fills in with a lot of CSS named attributes, or you can put a hex color or RGB value or whatever, okay? And if we look, this has now changed this font to be aquamarine, okay? And the way it's done that, if you look in the HTML here, I'm going to quickly hide that. If we look at the HTML, we'll see that what it's done, if we look at this, it adds style equals color aquamarine into the HTML, right? So that's a way of applying inline CSS. And I'm not going to really dive into that today. There's things like my CSS box stack that can help you do some of that stuff. But I just want to show you a way, if you wanted to affect the style in one element just to play around with, this is a great way to do that. Okay. Okay. If there's any questions as I'm going along, please make sure you put that in the chat box, and I will try to surface them. Hopefully I'm not going too quick for you guys. Hopefully you're kind of following me along. I know this is a really complex topic, and I tend to, because I do this all day long every day. I know I tend to go really quick through things. So please make sure you ask questions either now or feel free to ask later, and maybe I could do a follow-up stream on some questions. But now, if you'll notice, there are other tabs here in the Dev Inspector. I do a lot of my work in this particular tab first, like this Styles tab, because this is where I can see all the rules. The next one that I tend to use is this computed one. And what this does is it's a read-only view, but it shows you all of the styles that are applied to this particular object that you have selected. So we currently still have the H3 selected. And if you'll see, these are all the rules. Based on all the rules that are applied, this is the final rule set that is displayed in the browser. So this computed shows us that, this is the exact font size, this is the color, this is the font sizing, this is the line height, and all the margins, right? So for example, we have a margin bottom of 8 pixels on this guy, right? If I click on this little arrow, it'll actually take me to where that is defined inside the Styles tab too, which is really cool and very convenient. A lot of times I don't exactly know what styles are applied to an object, so I'll kind of surf through here and go like, oh yes, I want to modify this guy. This is really convenient, especially if you're starting off with CSS and you don't know what the CSS property for margins are, or the CSS thing for font size. Maybe you don't know that it's font dash size, right? So look in here and it shows you everything that is applied. And if you want to ever modify that or tweak that value, click on the little arrow in here and it will take you to that exact value inside the styles tab. And then you can muck around with it. Let's say I don't want this to be 1.9. I want this to be 2.9, right? So we can, here, let's turn off that aquamarine style because that's pretty hideous. So there we go. I can now change, test around and see how this font size looks at 2.9 instead of 1.9. Very, very useful. Okay. So someone is asking, they're going to my website and not seeing these changes. And the reason is, when I'm making changes inside the browser, it is not saving those changes to RapidWeaver. Okay, it is not saving those changes to the server. This is purely a temporary solution. It's like I have a copy of my website in my browser right now. Okay, so the browser has downloaded my entire web page and it has access to everything. Okay. And what I'm doing is I'm modifying the local copy that is inside my browser. That's why I said earlier, when I refresh this page, everything is going to go back to the default from my server, because and all those changes that I just did, if you see this text is now says support, it's back to the smaller version. It's not the larger version that I added, right? So this is, again, we're modifying just the local copy that's in my browser temporarily. And then what I'm going to show you is really soon, once we find the styles that we want to tweak, I will show you guys how to take those styles and apply them to your website on a permanent basis within RapidWeaver. Okay. But right now I am concentrated on helping you guys play around with this dev inspector and figure out what you want to change. Right. So let's say, for example, let's actually, I'm going to go ahead and open up a project file. Let me launch RapidWeaver really quick. Hopefully it's not going to prompt me to update like it did last week. Okay, so I'm going to open up my sandbox site. I should probably do this on my sandbox site so I'm not publishing the active web page. My live Weaver Space site. Okay, while that's opening, I'm going to, let's teach you a little bit about what a CSS, what CSS looks like, so that we know how to construct the CSS rules that we want. Okay. So to do that, I am going to open up a text editor. I'm going to open up one called VS Code, and let's just go ahead and open up a new file. Why isn't that file new window? There we go. Okay, not full screen. There we go. Okay. Remind me later. Thank you very much. Okay. And we'll minimize this. That's not what I wanted. Minimize. New file. Okay. Now, what's cool about editors such as VS Code or Sublime Text or BB Edit or Text Wrangler or Coda is another great one. There's tons of code editors out there. I've been using VS Code. It's actually from Microsoft. Believe it or not, great quality product on a Mac, written by Microsoft, used by most web developers out there in the world. Pretty crazy, right? And it's free. So kind of nuts balls is there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this to my desktop really quick. We're going to call this, lately, open and save dialogues on my machine have been like sluggish. Not sure what's going on there, but it's quite annoying. Okay, so here we're going to name this styles.css, and save that. Okay. Now, the reason I wanted to save it is when I save this as a CSS file, VS Code is going to actually display the CSS that I type into here and kind of give us some syntax highlighting, so it's a little bit easier to create. So what is the anatomy of a CSS rule? Okay, so if you've ever noticed, we have something called the selector, and this is such as H3, or you've probably seen like H3.alt that we saw earlier, right? So there's various syntaxes for this selector, but for right now, I'm just going to leave this placeholder call it selector, okay? And then what we do is we have opening and closing curly braces, the curly ones, okay? And I hit enter so that basically we can now have multiple lines to add CSS rules, okay? Now the CSS rule contains a property and a value. So here we have the property, colon, and then the value. And then what you need to do is you need to finish that rule with a semicolon, okay? And then what you could do is here you could do, and you could do as many properties as you want. So you could do property 2, colon, value 2, semicolon, okay? So hopefully that's kind of making sense. I'll make it even a little bit bigger for you guys. So this is the anatomy of what a CSS rule will look like. So let's take that example of that rule that we wanted to apply to the header on our page, okay? Remember, it was h3.alt, okay? So h3.alt, and then I can fork out my little curly braces, and then I remember we wanted to change the color to, and then, whatever we wanted. Let's do like 333, right? So this is going to change the color to be 333, which is dark gray. Now, this little editor kind of gives you this little color swatch. That's a feature of the code editor. It's not in the actual code. If I were to copy and paste this, that little color block there actually isn't there. It's kind of visually there, a representation. It's a feature of the code editor that lets us do that. So we can kind of see when we have lots of CSS on our page. It's kind of cool because you can kind of see the colors that you're actually using instead of just color codes, right? So very cool. So in this example, we have our selector, we have h3.alt, and then we have our property, which is color, and then we set the value. In this case, the value for color is going to be 333, which is dark gray. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, the anatomy of a CSS rule. Now, obviously, we can add more. Let's say we wanted to, remember that had a bottom margin, right? So we could do margin dash bottom, okay? And we could say 0 pixels. Because maybe on this particular one, I want to make sure the bottom has 0 pixels on the margin. Okay, so this is where we have our property, which here is margin bottom. And then here is the value, which is 0 pixels. Okay. And you can have as many of these property value rules as you want within these curly braces, and all of them will be applied to your selector. Okay. Now, if you remember inside that dev inspector, we could apply these same rule sets to multiple selectors. And you can do that with just simply adding a comma. So like if I wanted to apply this to h4.alt, I could do that as well. Okay. Now, I will explain what the dots are. And another one you'll see commonly is a hashtag. Okay. And a lot of times you'll see, this stacks underscore ID or, stacks underscore page underscore 0, something like that, right? That's going to be a common ID you see on the page. You could style that. I don't recommend that. Styling to the stacks ID. Stick with class. And these dots are basically H3. So you have an H3 that has a class of alt. Okay, so here this rule is going to find all H3 tags that have a class of alt inside of them, or has a class on the H3 of alt. Okay. Now, finding out the selector is probably going to be the most difficult part of CSS. And I'm not going to try to dive into all the various ways you can build a CSS selector. There's a lot of them. Okay. But I do have an easy way to help you figure out what your CSS selector should be. Okay. And, oops, I want to go back to the browser here. Or Safari. There we go. Okay, so here's back in Safari. And here, let's inspect this header again. And you're not seeing it, but I got a pinwheel right now. There we go. Right, right click, inspect. And there it is again. So here's our H3. And if we remember over here, we have all of our rules that are getting applied. And if you look above, like here's this color where it's setting the color to be white. If you look above that, we have h1.alt, comma h2.alt. What we can do is, if you want that, you can just copy it. Okay. So like, let's say, for example, let's say I want to start tweaking this particular, like here's a complicated CSS rule right here, right? This one's a lot more tricky, but if you know that you wanted to affect the font weight, I recommend 8 for that particular one. Use Font Pro, but as an example, right? You could, this is a complex selector. All you have to do, instead of trying to learn what this is yourself and trying to figure out what that is, just copy it. Click on it, select it, Command C, go into your browser, Command V, okay? And you're done, right? Here, that was a big one, right? So it's really, really big. But as you see, there's all of the code. Okay, let's go back big again. So we have all of that code, and finding that selector is easy because we can go ahead and use the browser to help us determine what that selector is going to be, right? And to test, if you ever wanted to be like, okay, I think for this selector, I want to add color red, right? What you do here is you just say color red. Oops, I could type red. Man, I cannot type R-E-D. There we go. Oh, turn that off. Okay, so now, if we notice, I added some styles into here. So you can add, I added my own style, and let's say I could do like, oops. So we go here. Let's say I could do background. Let's do some, oh man, this is gonna look horrible. Background yellow, right? So now, for this particular selector, I do color red, background yellow. And if you notice, what it did is everything else that selector applies to also gets those styles. So it's a good thing to know to figure out if that is the selector you really want, right? Is to apply your styles inside of here. And then what you're going to do is you're going to be like, okay, that's the style I want. Please don't do yellow background with red text. Just an example, using that as an example to kind of be in your face and kind of show you, right? But if that styles everything the way that you think you're going to want, then that that is your selector. Okay. Now let's say, let's go ahead and now let's jump into RapidWeaver actually. So we figured out that this is the CSS that we want. How do we then put that inside RapidWeaver? Okay, so last step here. We're almost across the finish line. So here I have a page, and I'm just going to add just for simplicity, I'm going to add a alt. I need title, and okay. What we're going to do here is so here inside site styles we have the header to be I'm actually going to change the site background to be something different. Change it to be like like a purple. Why not? Okay. So our site background is going to be purple. And I'm going to create two headers here. I have a header, and on this particular one, I'm going to set the header to be style of alt. Now this is the foundation header stacks. Okay. I have one that's just the straight up header, and the other one is the alt header. Okay. And if we wanted to, we can go ahead and turn on preview background inside foundation, so we can preview the actual color of the background, so we can see our header text here. Okay. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set this to be alt header, and we're gonna set this to be regular header. Okay. And for fun, I'm actually gonna put those inside of a column stack, just so that it's just a little clean. Okay. And let's go ahead and just add a little bit of padding here, just for fun. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and preview this in a browser. So if you know, Command P inside RapidWeaver will preview that inside of a browser. And here we go. Okay. So here is my really super simple page. And I want to customize this now, because let's say I'm using a stack that, you know, this header right here, it doesn't have a color. It doesn't have any settings to customize that color, or and maybe we'll add some margins and a background color. Okay, just for fun. Okay, and I want to target both of these. Like, how can I target one versus the other? Okay, so if I inspect this, if I right click on alt header and inspect element, we'll notice that this has exactly what we saw before. It is H3, and it has a class of alt. So I know from experience that, and if you look here also inside the styles, all the rules here are grayed out, H1.alt, H2.alt, but H3.alt isn't, because that's the actual selector that is being used here. So I know I can target this particular header with H3.alt, okay, because that's what this says here inside the dev inspector. And the other one, if I go here and I inspect that, that is just a normal H3. It doesn't have any special classes on it. It's just a normal H3. Okay, so let's play with rules to modify both of these, and we'll do it, and we'll set these rules up and then move them into RapidWeaver so we can see it in the actual live page. Okay. Oops, did I close my VS Code window? Ah, shoot, I closed that. Oh, I still have it on my desktop. Haha. Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. So I knew that we wanted to do h3.alt. Okay, and what I can do is I'm going to delete this one up here, and I'm going to copy this. So I'm going to create two rules. I'm going to have one for H3, and let's say on H3 I want to make that colors, the color here, I want that to be red, and then I'm going to set the background color to be yellow. I know this is going to look hideous, but I just want to really be bold and show you guys what we're going to do here. And I want the margin bottom here to be big. Like, let's set it to be like 30 pixels. Okay. And then on the alt, it's currently set to white. So let's go ahead and set that to be green. Oops. Green. And we're going to set the background color to be powder blue. Okay, even though green on powder blue probably looks horrible. And margin bottom, will set that to be 0. Okay. Oh, and there we go. Forgot my semicolon at the end of my rule. Now, let's go ahead, and this is valid CSS now. If you notice, when I didn't have the semicolon here, okay, if you look carefully, you'll see some red squiggly lines, and that is the actual code editor telling me that I have some syntax errors on the page. And So here I'm going to add a semicolon at the end. Okay. So here I've created my rules. And remember, I got the selector from the Safari Dev Inspector. So I knew that, oops, wrong window. I got rid of it. Anyway, I got it from the Dev Inspector. We have h3.alt, right? And I copied that from the Dev Inspector, and I created my rules. Now, in a minute, I'm going to show you some resources where to learn where these rules are. I've also showed you where you can see the existing ones that are applied to a particular element. And so right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of this text, and we're going to go into my RapidWeaver project. And there are two places that you can put this code. Okay, so if I want to make sure that this code is only applied to this web page and only this web page, what I'm going to do is you're going to go into the page inspector and go into the CSS tab, and we're going to paste that in. Okay, and if we preview this, we'll see that it's working. I have my H3. I have titled that to have a yellow background with red text. Okay, and I have my H3 alt. I define that differently, and I want that to be green text on a blue background. Okay, hopefully, I know I might be going a little bit fast for some people. I notice I'm already approaching an hour, so I picked up the pace a little bit, right? So that's cool, but there are also some times where the CSS of a stack, let's say you're trying to override the value of a stack, and no matter what CSS you're trying to use, it will not override the setting that stack is doing. Okay, so how can we change that? There is something inside CSS. So let's say I wanted to make all H3s on the page red and yellow. Okay. What I can do is actually, let's go ahead and I'm going to delete the h3.alt rule here. Okay. And I have H3s. So I'm applying everything to every H3 on the page. Color red, background yellow, margin bottom 30 pixels. Let's see what that does. Probably didn't do what you expected it to do, right? Okay. So if we look at the rules here, okay, so that top one worked. It did exactly what we wanted. We wanted red text with a yellow background. But this second one here, that h3.alt, it still has white. Why is that? Okay. Well, so if we look at the rules here, we can see what is overriding what, right? So here we have h3.alt, and it's set to be white. And that is overriding down here. We see this is the CSS that we added into RapidWeaver. H3, color red, background yellow, margin bottom 30 pixels. Now, the background color yellow is getting applied, and then the margin bottom is getting applied, but the color red is not. And the reason for this is that, without getting too technical here, the h3.alt rule is more specific because it's styling not only H3s, but H3s with a class of alt. That rule is going to be more specific. So let's say you don't want to figure out, you just want to shove that style in there. Like, I don't care what this stack says or what this page says. I want to make sure that my style is color red, regardless. How do we do that? It's pretty simple, actually. There is something called bang important. Now, I say bang because it is a exclamation point, which in programming speak, in a lot of other places, it's called a bang, right? So do exclamation point important. And when we have that exclamation important on a rule, it says that, this rule takes precedence over almost any other rule. There are some other cases if there's another bang important rule on the page that could be more specific and blah, 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 right? This is why you don't want to use bang important too much, because you could have run into some issues. But there are times where you're just like, I know this is what I want. I'm going to force this color red on my particular selector. Okay. So let's go ahead and add this to the page. So I'm going to just copy this. going to go into Rapid Weaver, and we're going to paste it right in there. And let's preview the page. And voila, we see now that H3 alt is red. And that's because I added the bang important rule. And as you see here, this rule up at the top, even though it's a higher specificity, if we look further below, we can see that this rule is the one getting applied. And the reason is because it has that bang important. Okay. So hopefully I didn't go too fast for most of you. But this dev inspector is going to be very, very powerful. A really, really great thing to learn. Okay. Now, what are a lot of the other common CSS properties that I think you might want to use? Okay. First off, let me show you where you can find all of these CSS properties. Okay. There are two ways. I'll show you the way I use it. There's two things that I particularly use. First is a Mac app called Dash. And let me let this launch really quick. Dash is a programming documentation tool for programmers. Okay. Extremely valuable. As you see, I have tons of different languages installed. You can pick and choose what you want to have installed. Like, for example, if you only want CSS, you can do that. And here's CSS. So I think I can, yeah. So here, if we go into CSS, I don't think I can make this interface bigger, can I? No, I can't. If you go in here, you can see that if we go into properties, you'll see that there is a list of every possible CSS property. And if you click on it, it also, it's really cool. It goes to a website on Mozilla that actually shows you what that CSS property does. And then it shows you syntaxes for how to do it. It even has like this cool little playground thing where you can play around with it, right? I love Dash. And many of you probably also seen that I use Alfred, this little launcher utility. I've had a few people ask me what it is, right? And in Alfred, I can simply type like CSS space and then like back, and then back. And if you notice here, it filters out inside Dash everything that I could possibly want. And if I'm like, oh, I need to see background size, hit enter, it immediately opens Dash to background size. So I can kind of read the synopsis of how that CSS property is used. Pretty cool stuff. Okay. So how else do we do this? If you don't want to have Dash, I think Dash is actually free. It was free for a long time. And then it's like, I think optional pay in the app or something like that. I forget how the pricing model, if it's changed at all. It used to be a freemium model. But you can also go to developer.mozilla.org, and then you see the same exact docs that are inside Dash. And you can search search within here as well. However, there's another really great website called W3 Schools. And this is an amazing website for real novices. And if you go to on the side, if you go to CSS reference, or CSS in the main bar, right, it has full CSS tutorials and stuff like that as well. And what's really cool is if we go to the CSS reference down here, you'll see over here on the sidebar, there is all the possible selectors that you can use for all the various CSS properties. So we have border stuff, there's borders, column stuff, flex stuff, grid. Some really, obviously a lot of this is very advanced, but there are obviously the simple ones such as margin and padding, stuff like that. So what I'm going to close out with is I'm going to list out for you guys a few CSS properties that you might want to know, right? So color is a big one. Okay, hold on. Okay. So first is color. Okay, we want color. Here, let's make this a little bit bigger. Background. And you can also use, let's see, background image and background color is a big one. And then we have margin, and then there's padding. Now, margin and padding actually both have more specific versions. So there's margin and then there's padding. But you can also do, if you only want to apply something to like the top margin top, you could do margin dash top. Margin. So you could do margin dash top, margin dash bottom, margin dash left, margin dash right. Same thing for padding, right? So you could do padding dash left or padding dash right, things of that nature. Okay. Another popular one you might want to use is font size. So you could do font dash size. That's going to contribute to the size of a font. Next up is going to be, let's see, we did color, font size. I think another common one is going to be Z-index. Now, what is Z-index? This is kind of this is one where if you have an issue and you're like, hey, Joe, this menu is like underneath the image. Like, let's say you have an image and the image is when you open up a submenu, that submenu is going behind an image, right? That is something, that is something called the Z-index layer, right? So it's the stacking order away from the web page. And that gives it a number value. So it's, Z-index 10. So a lot of times you'll see us, if you give you something like, ZX 999. So like, that's going to be a really high Z-index, right? So it's going to make it hopefully above almost anything on the page, right? So Z-index, while it can be tricky, a really tricky one, even sometimes Z-index issues can be a little tricky for me, because depending on the order of things and how the stacking happens, and it's kind of crazy stuff, okay? But I think that is a really good list for a lot of the most common CSS things that you'll want, right? Changing custom margin and padding are good for spacing, right? So that's going to be, how are things spaced? What's the empty space between your items, right? That is going to be margin or padding. Then there's, the font size, font colors, background image, and of course Z-index. So let me quickly glance through the chat room, and let's see, what is the name of the app you generate CSS code? So the app that I'm using right now, that is called VS Code, Visual Studio Code. It is by Microsoft. It is free. Another great one that I use for many years is called Sublime Text. And then another one that is a freebie is called, I was going to recommend Text Wrangler. It's been recently renamed to be under the umbrella of BB Edit. So BB Edit is another great free option. There is a paid tier to BB Edit that gives you more advanced stuff, but you probably don't need that. But anyway, I use VS Code from Microsoft. It's really great. Panic, the makers of Transmit, they're redoing a new version of Coda. I used Coda for years, so I'm actually excited to see when that gets released. I think it's around 2020 though. So, but that I'm keeping my eye open. With how Coda comes out, the new version of Coda. It's not even going to be called Coda, is what Panic says. Bold. Someone asked about bold text. So yeah, bold is going to be font dash weight. That is going to be the property for that. And yeah, so font weight is, be careful with font weight though, especially if you're loading external fonts. Okay. Make sure that we don't want to because if you set the weight of a font and the font that you're loading doesn't support that exact weight, because with font weight you can actually put in like the exact number of the weight, because weights come in anywhere from 100 to 900, and if you set the exact weight but that font you didn't load that exact weight for a font, or maybe a font that you're using for that header, the weight doesn't even exist for that font, it could, what's called faux rendering could happen, which means your text isn't going to look really super crisp. So just be careful with that. You could also do font weight bold, and then the browser tries to intelligently load the right weight if it is loaded. So be careful with that, especially if you're loading external fonts using something like Font Pro, or if you're using Google Fonts inside Site Styles. make sure that you're loading the proper weights and setting the weights inside those stacks, because those stacks really help you control and stay away from the thing called faux rendering, right? So we want to make sure that if we're going to use really nice typography, that that's done. So, but with that said, font weight, bold, or normal, that is going to be how you can set the font weight. If you want italics, same caveat goes with italics. With the faux rendering, if you don't load the italic version of a font, so you're going to do font weight or font style italic, and that will set the font style to be italic. But if you're not loading the italic version of that font that is getting applied to that particular style, or that's, that text, then the browser is going to try to just skew the text to the side, and it's going to create a not nice version of that font in italics. So hopefully, yeah. So anyway, yeah, I hope that helps everyone. We've gone a little bit over today. I know this is a big topic, and I probably went fast for some of you, and I only scratched the surface of what we can do in CSS as well. But hopefully I made it edible for you guys, for lack of a better term, right? Where it was consumable, where, using that dev inspector, you can figure out what your styles are getting applied, and then you can start playing with it inside the inspector. And you're not going to break anything. Do all you want, because remember, all you got to do is refresh the page, and it'll get rid of everything that you've done. That's a good thing, and also a bad thing if you've done a lot of stuff and you're like, oh no, I forgot what I did, and you want to copy it into a text editor or a Rapidweaver or something like that, right? So be cautious of that. Refreshing it will get rid of a lot of work that you've done. But a good part is, if you just want to start from scratch with playing around, just refresh the page and you're good. But use the dev inspector to figure out what your selectors are. Peruse what different styles are available and how they affect things on the page. You can turn those styles on and off with the checkboxes. You can type in new values for those CSS properties directly in the inspector, and you can see it live change right there on the web page. Really cool stuff. We learned a couple great places to learn about more CSS selectors and how we can research those. And then I give you a list here at the end here on common CSS selectors that you might want to use on a routine basis. So hopefully today helps you out, guys, helped you out a little bit. And next week, I promise, I'll get that green screen right there set up. I'm really bummed it completely crashed right behind me right before. But anyway, at least happened then and not like during the live stream, because that would have sucked even more. But anyway, thank you very much, guys. I appreciate you joining, being interactive in the chats. I really appreciate that. I love interacting with you guys. I wish I could see you and meet you all in person. That'd be really awesome. Maybe one day. But yeah, take care. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Go out and make something great. Hopefully we'll see you on Friday at the Hangouts. Same time as this live stream actually was, but on Friday. And just go to Weaverspace/Hangout. And at 1:30 p.m. Pacific, a lot of people in the chat room here are joined frequently. Jody, Grant, Scott, Wolf, all those guys, Tony, a lot of those guys are regulars. They kind of join in. We love having new people come in. Don't be intimidated. Just come in, have some fun. A lot of times we don't even talk about web design. We chit chat about all kinds of stuff. And we just have a lot of fun. So hopefully we can see you there. Also mark your calendars, October 18th to 20th. We are going to have this year's Weaverspace conference. I'm actually calling it Weaverspace Summit this year. Ooh, it's the summit. And going to be really great. I have some spectacular speakers lined up. Actually, a couple of them were in the chat box today. So cool. See you then. Have a wonderful week, guys. Hope you're enjoying all these live streams, and we will see you next week at regular time. Next week, we're back at 11:30 a.m. Pacific, in case anything changes before then. But we'll be back at our normal time next week, and we'll see you then. Take care, bud. Take care, everybody. Bye.